Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. If you're a woman healing from betrayal trauma and craving space to breathe, regulate, and reconnect with yourself, I want to share a few upcoming healing experiences that you might want to explore. I help facilitate these intensives and retreats alongside some of my most trusted colleagues. They're small, trauma-informed settings designed really to support your nervous system and not overwhelm it. March 17th through the 20th is our Betrayal Trauma Intensive. May 5th through the 8th is a Somatic Healing Intensive. Both of those are held in Spanish Fork, Utah. And July 20th through the 27th, we're hosting the Rise, Renew, Restore Retreat in Costa Rica. And there's just a few spots still available. You can learn more about all of these upcoming events in the show notes. And remember that you don't have to rush your healing and you don't have to do it alone. Welcome back to today's episode, and I'm so happy that you're here with me. I'm excited to be talking about a topic today that can sometimes be misunderstood, either oversimplified or weaponized in a lot of healing spaces, and that is trauma bonds. And here to talk with me about this today is one of my dear friends, trusted colleagues, and associates who I love and admire, Staci Somes. Staci is a licensed therapist in the state of Idaho. She is also a certified clinical partner specialist with ABSATs and a betrayal trauma coach as well. She's a brain spotting practitioner. She just comes with a wealth of skills and knowledge and a presence that you're going to love. So I'm so excited that you all get to meet Staci and get to know her on a little bit of a deeper level, and just love our friendship and professional association, Staci. So thanks for agreeing to come and chat with me today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. And so today, when we were talking about what topic we were going to talk about, and you suggested trauma bonds, instantly I was like, yes, let's talk about trauma bonds. Because sometimes when you think that term, or when you hear that term, immediately it might be something that you go, well, there must be something wrong with me, or there must be a weakness, or I must be a failure because why can't I just leave? But there's more to it than just that. And so I want to help break it down a little bit for our audience to understand. So when you use the word trauma bond, what do you think you want people to understand that often gets either missed or misunderstood?
Well, I think first of all, people get the term wrong out of the get-go. Some people think, oh, well, I've been through a trauma and someone else has been through a trauma, and that makes us trauma bonded. And that is not what we're talking about today. So I just right out of the get-go wanted to kind of clarify that. I do hear that thrown around a lot out on the internet. And no, we're talking about something else. We're talking about that emotional attachment that happens through cycles of abuse. And so I think you ask yourself the question, have you ever been deeply attached to someone who repeatedly hurt you, but it felt like you couldn't leave? And we get confused. And I have a lot of clients that come in and they'll be like, what's wrong with me? Like, I know this isn't love, but it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not a weakness. And it's not just in these romantic relationships. These trauma bonds pop up all over the place. And it's not because you're foolish. It's people who are very highly educated fall into the trauma bond cycle. It's like this attachment where you feel stuck and you go, why do I keep going back? What is going on here?
So when you say it's not just exclusively in romantic relationships, are you talking about like familial relationships or? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's in romantic relationships. It can pop up with parents and children. It can happen even with people in their jobs.
I'm wondering, like in a workplace, a toxic boss or something, and people
Yes.
need to come back.
It can happen with friends, even. It happens everywhere.
That's a really good clarification. So what I'm gathering is that this is at a deeper level. This is nervous
Hmm.
system level, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
what would you say to that? What's happening in our body?
I would say there's this dysfunctional attachment that's taking place. It especially pops up when there's shame, when there's danger, when there's sometimes exploitation. Our sympathetic nervous system activates that fight or flight. And in that state of mind, honestly, we don't think long term at all. And so when the brain is so hyper focused on survival, we become attached because there's a positive enforcement after something negative. And so it is very much connected to that sympathetic nervous system. And
Mm.
that's what's happening. I was actually watching Charlie Brown this fall with my kids, and we were watching Lucy put that football down, and Charlie Brown runs to go kick that football. And I just remember watching it and being like, that's a trauma bond right there. Because every time Charlie thinks that Lucy is going to do something different, she whips that ball away and he falls. That's a silly little example, but yep, we trust.
It's
We trust over and
interesting.
over again. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how sometimes movies and cartoons and things like that insert these dysfunctional
Mm-hmm.
patterns and they become obvious. I never thought about that with Charlie Brown, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so what conditions tend to create trauma bonds in relationships? What's happening?
There's so many signs, but there's a few that I always like to point out with my clients. One of them is that you obsess about people who might be long gone, like you fantasize about them, you think about them a lot. This one's not exactly part of the coupleship, but you think about this person a lot, even though you don't want to. That's one. It's continuing to seek out contact with people who you know are going to cause you further pain. One that always sticks out in my mind is going above and beyond, going overboard to help people who've been destructive to you.
Mm.
That one, yeah, really stands out. Or you keep being like a team player, even though your partner isn't being a teammate.
Yeah.
That one's huge, right? Things are becoming destructive, but you keep showing up as a team player. Another is you keep trying to get someone to like you who is clearly using you. And then you continue to hand over your trust over and over again with people who've proven to be unreliable, but you just keep doing it. So those are a few. I see a lot the inability to retreat from an unhealthy relationship. So continuing to show up just like that cartoon.
So that's where my mind is going as I'm hearing you describe
Mhm.
this, because if you think about watching someone from the outside that might be in this situation, I can think of people in my circle who I can identify this with from the outside, but on the inside, they seem to have no awareness of it. Or if they do, an inability to get out. It's not strength, it's not courage. What makes it so hard to break out of a trauma bond? And how does someone even begin that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. But very first and foremost is understanding what's happening. And so if I'm sensing it with a client, I never say, you're in a trauma bonded relationship. But I will say, hey, I want to talk about something. I want to go through some slides, a little psychoeducation on this. And it's amazing to me how by talking about these things, they all of a sudden start seeing themselves. So it isn't about someone else that's calling it out. It's them recognizing it and connecting the dots, if you will. One of the other signs that really helped me identify what was happening in my life was you continue to try to be understood by someone who clearly doesn't care. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me, because it doesn't matter how hard I try to tell someone what you're doing is hurting me, whether it be crying or begging or being very, very kind. I felt like I continued to try all of these different ways to get someone to understand, and they just don't care. So I had to recognize that for myself. I may have had my best friend who was like, hey, there's some things that I'm seeing here that are not adding up, but it has to come within yourself. Now, there are some practical things that we can do as well, but I'll finish going through a couple other signs that I want to hit on because I don't want to miss any. Another one that comes to my mind is when you're trying to tell someone, there's a problem here. Do you sense that there's a problem here? I'm trying to convince someone that there's an issue, and they will not listen. They will not listen. There's no empathy. There's no seeking to understand. I think one of the biggest ones, at least in this space, is continuing to be loyal to people who betray you over and over and over again.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
That was my next question as far as in this betrayal, if we look at it in betrayal trauma specifically, because you can have trauma bonds not being in a betrayal trauma situation where there's infidelity or your primary relationship is not having sexual betrayal. But does this intensify the trauma bonding for
Yeah.
partners who choose to stay?
Well, it can. I've heard, and I don't know the specifics, but essentially we become addicted to that dopamine high of feeling loved, feeling seen, feeling heard. And there's typically a pattern that we see with these stages of trauma bonding. And it starts with that love bombing. And I like to always say love bombing doesn't necessarily mean that like gifts are chucked at you. Sometimes it does. But when you've been with someone for a really long time, they know exactly what it is that makes your heart sing. They know exactly what to say. They know what to do. And it's easy to get sucked right back in because it feels so good. It's that hit of dopamine that comes after you've been through this whole cycle. And so that's typically where it starts. And then it moves into, okay, I'm okay. I'm going to start leaning in and I'm going to start trusting and I'm going to start depending again, which is such a human thing to do. It feels really good. It's what we want so badly. But when we're in a trauma bond and it's toxic, then we tend to see the same steps that follow. The next one is we start seeing some devaluing. We see some criticizing that comes up, which is incredibly painful. And then it moves more into the gaslighting and the manipulating, which a lot of us are very familiar with. Mm-hmm. Your truth is suddenly not your truth. You're manipulated into believing that you're the problem. You need to go work on yourself. This is a you thing, whatever. That didn't really happen. That type of place. Very confusing. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times people will get to that point and they'll go, you know what? It's pointless. I'm resigning control here. Nothing's going to change anyway, which is very tragic because then here is where we just lose ourselves. Mm-hmm. And in that state of mind, you know, the love bombing comes back and that addiction, I call it an addiction. We are addicted to that dopamine high. We're not talking about his addiction or anything like that, but it feels very addicting to come back into that place of, okay, I'm safe again. Mm-hmm. I'm connected again. He loves me or she. And so it's very, very intense.
So you've mentioned earlier that awareness and recognition is how we begin. I would imagine that insight alone isn't enough. So once we start to have that awareness, where do we go from there?
Yeah. I think one of the first things is to start finding some resources. This kind of taps into the awareness, but using your friends, using your family, trusted friends and family as a sounding board. I think sometimes going through betrayal, we don't trust ourselves. This is something that happens to many of us. But when you can verbalize, when you have a safe place to say, okay, here's how I'm feeling inside of my body. And then here's what I'm seeing. It's amazing how just saying that out loud can be a really good way to do a pressure check on where am I? So that is one thing. I love this book. This is Trauma Bonding by Lauren Kozlowski. super short book. It's like 50 pages. This was very helpful with clarifying what was happening.
Okay,
Okay.
we
And
can
then,
put a link to that in the show
yeah,
notes in case anybody wants to look
it's
that up.
fantastic. Another way, simple way, is to really face your feelings, which is giving you a clearer picture of the impact of this relationship. And that really helps with being able to prioritize yourself and put yourself first. I feel like that's something that has to happen where you are like, wow, this is really impacting me in these ways. And so, how does this really make me feel? Sounds really simple, right? Sounds like a really basic thing. But when we can really get in touch with how this is making us feel, it's a hinge point moment. Another is good grief. Validate yourself through some positive talking. Don't criticize yourself. Be on your own side. When you say, I'm such an idiot, or how could I be so pathetic or dumb, that is not going to help when we're trying to turn and face a trauma bond. Okay. So watch how you're speaking to yourself. That's a big one.
Yeah, I think that makes a huge difference too. And some hearing as you're describing some of these things like a thread of rebuilding that self-trust, just one small action at a time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that does come in that how do I speak to myself? How can I find some self-compassion? Like I did the best I could with the knowledge and information that I had and those types
Yeah.
of things. But then also, I think every time that we use our voice to, speak up or to implement a boundary and hold it, we're putting another drop of trust in that self-trust bucket. And so it
Mhm.
might not happen overnight, but as we can fill that trust bucket of our own a little bit at a time, then it's compounding effort. It grows and grows and grows, and our strength and courage and our self-confidence and self-worth gets bigger as well. And then I would imagine in a trauma bond that could be so helpful to try and step out of these destructive patterns.
Yes. And one thing, just because I was talking about this within the last week with a client, we were talking about give yourself permission to listen to yourself.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is sometimes we'll have thoughts that will just come to us out of nowhere. Pay attention to those. If you feel a very subtle like tap on the shoulder and you weren't even thinking about anything, you were triggered in the moment, but a thought comes and then it comes again and it might come a third time. Those are the ones that I'm like, that is it. You listen to that. Your gut is probably right 90 something percent of the time. Our brains are fantastic with talking ourselves out of listening to ourselves, especially after we've been through betrayal. We think if I'm wrong about him, I'm probably wrong about everything. So we talked about just leaning in and listening and finding out information. And if we're wrong, who cares? At least you were true to yourself. At least you tried to listen. So if you can't give yourself permission, maybe allow me to give you permission today to just go ahead and listen to that. I think you're right, especially about the boundaries part too. That is another big part in dealing with trauma bonds. Firm boundaries need to be in place here.
Yeah. That's a whole nother can of worms we could
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about. Boundaries is
Yeah.
so it's so hard to move out of controlling basically rules into healthy boundaries. But
Mm.
that's why I think having a good supportive professional on board that can help you identify the difference between like control and actual healthy boundaries is huge and important. I'm
Yes.
also,
And along with the professional, I love groups too so much because they really provide that perspective. You're sitting there listening to someone else talk about something and it resonates with you or it connects with you. And you're like, oh my gosh, I see that happening in my marriage too. And sometimes those hit the hardest when we resonate with someone or we connect with someone's story. And so that can be really helpful with providing some of that perspective that we otherwise may not have received any other way.
I agree. I will just give my own endorsement on groups as well. I think they are game changing for women who are walking betrayal trauma. In my ideal world, everybody would have a coach, a therapist, and a group all at the same time.
Yep.
You could have all the
Agreed.
support on board.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking, as I'm hearing you talking about listening to that voice, I think it's really common in betrayal trauma. We know our nervous system's on overdrive, right? We know our nervous system is on like high alert. But often what comes with that is those racing thoughts. Or I've kind of described it as this constant underlying buzzing all the time in my body and my nervous system. And it's really hard to hear or to trust what I'm hearing when that's happening. And so I'm also thinking about the value of slowing down,
Mhm.
giving yourself
Yes.
some calm and grounded time purposefully. And I'm the first one to tell you that this is not easy to do when you're in that trauma state because go, go, go feels what like you need to do to be safe.
Mhm.
And so much of healing, at least in my own path, has been learning how to slow down and be comfortable in the calm and grounded. Because when you feel like you need to be on high alert all the time, calm and grounded can actually feel a little uncomfortable. And so,
Yeah.
like training your body and your brain to get comfortable in that calm so that you can tune in more to those little taps on your shoulders and hear them more often. Any thoughts about that?
Oh, absolutely. If you think about, we have a physical response, and then we usually tell ourselves a thought. It leads to sometimes some very self destructive thoughts. Like I was saying earlier, I'm not enough. How could I be so stupid? Why do I continue to let this happen? And those thoughts are loud. You're right. And so, one of the things that we need to do is recognize what we do when that voice starts getting really loud. And sometimes we immediately go to those quick fix, band aid types of methods of dealing with it. So notice what you're doing. Am I just immediately doom scrolling? Am I running to bed and just trying to sleep away all of the noise? And not necessarily that sleep is bad, but all things in moderation, right? Am I grabbing a cake and eating the whole thing? Am I turning to alcohol? Or there's so many unhealthy things that we can do because it just feels really easy. But I think part of slowing down is recognizing what are the things that actually help me get back into my body. And that's where we have to build our own toolboxes and we have to get really familiar with what works for us.
Mhm.
I always say it's like a salad bar, right? Like for some people, oh, I love meditation and that really helps me. For some people, that doesn't work. So it's all about finding what works for you. And so, what slows you down? Is it a walk? Is it journaling? Is it doing some trauma yoga? Is it doing something for someone else? We all have to figure out what it is that helps slow us down. And then we have to become very aware of when that buzzing gets really loud and we deliberately have to choose what we're going to do.
Yeah. Actually have, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes. I actually have a free download on mindful tips in recovery. So if anybody wants some ideas about what that might look like, it is called, let me find it. It's called A Mini Guide to Mindful Healing After Betrayal. And I'll make
Perfect.
sure there's a link to that download in the show notes because you're right. There are a lot of different ways to be mindful and to get out of your head into your body and finding your own safety rather than looking for it from someone else, but finding it from within.
Hmm.
The other thing that I know to be true in these toxic environments is that it's really hard to find that calm, grounded centeredness when you're constantly getting re traumatized or the dysfunction is continuing to happen. So I would imagine you got to lean in hard to this
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
You got to
Mhm.
lean in hard to trusting yourself and finding your inner calm and your inner safety.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client recently who she just recognized that the boundaries that needed to be in place for her all had to do with how she was communicating because she kept trying to hand over her heart and be vulnerable and share that this is hurting. And she recognized he is not in a place right now in his recovery to hear what I'm saying. So even though she kept trying to hand him that, it felt like he just kept dismissing it. And so the boundary for her is for a while, I need to be very cautious with who I'm opening up my heart to. And so I'm going to take that to my best friend or my mom or my group instead of him. And that was really scary and really hard. But it was very helpful with her being able to finally listen to herself and get that validation to help her continue to heal and decide whether or not he was going to continue in his healing and join her in working on the coupleship. But in the meantime, she was doing some amazing things to really protect her heart and to allow her to continue to heal, which I thought was really brave. And he noticed it, I think. And that was actually a really good thing for him as well,
Mhm.
because he was like, wait, what? She's not engaging in those same dance steps that we always engage in whenever there's any conflict. And it was a bit of a, oh, aha, something's changing. So that was good.
Yeah, and I often say that one person can break a cycle, one person can
Mhm.
stop the dysfunction. And when you do that, which again, I kind of hate, like, I wish he would just do the work to step out of his undestructive patterns. But if he
Mhm.
doesn't, you can do your work to step out of that cycle. And then that actually gives him the opportunity to look and go, oh, okay, there's something's got to change here. I've got to change something within myself too. And then I think
Mhm.
you can see whether or not the willingness is there to do the deeper work or not. And then that gives you information as to what your
Yes.
next steps need to be.
Mhm. I always say that's valuable data, very valuable data.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So on that note, how would you describe the difference between trauma bonding and like authentic love? What's the difference there?
Yeah, there's a couple distinct differences for sure. And this is just a very brief overview. In a trauma bonded love, it feels really explosive. It feels intense right out of the get go, and it fluctuates a lot. Let's compare that to more of an authentic love. That is more of a gradual progression towards a greater intimacy. So there's one distinct difference. Another is in a trauma bonded love, you will hear things like, I need you, or I'm addicted to you, versus an authentic love where it's like more, I see you, I hear you, I'm listening, I'm trying to understand you. Another one that I see a lot is in a trauma bonded love, it feels really chaotic. And so I have a lot of clients that say, my relationship feels like a roller coaster. It's all over the place. It's unpredictable. The emotions are all over the place. Whereas in a more authentic love, you will feel safer. It feels a lot more predictable. It feels like there's mutual trust and that there are words that are aligning with actions, right? And that is huge. We always talk about watching the feet, not just hearing the words, all of the promises of this is going to change, but you're watching the feet and going, are you within your own integrity here? So, a couple others. In a trauma bonded relationship, there's a lot of emotional phobia, not wanting to tap into feelings, not wanting to talk about feelings. But you will see a lot of highly sexual components in the relationship. Opposite of that, in a more authentic love, is there's emotional vulnerability. We're free to talk about how we're feeling. There's an open communication that's give and take about feelings in general. And then the last one, usually in a trauma bond, there is a dynamic, a power imbalance that we will see. That person that is perpetuating the abuse, for lack of a better way of saying that, is the one who's in charge. Okay.
Mhm.
Versus an authentic love, there are healthy boundaries, there's independence within the relationship. We're a partnership.
Mhm.
And we are allowed to have feelings and not be walking on eggshells. And hey, I might be having a really bad day for no reason, but I don't have to worry about whether or not I am loved. It's a PMS day, or I'm just super emotional. I don't have to worry that I'm going to be rejected just because I'm a human being.
Mhm. Sounds lovely.
Hmm. Yeah.
The question that comes to my mind, and I'm sure some of my listeners are wondering too, is can a relationship move from trauma bonding into a secure attachment? And what has to change for that to happen, if so?
Yeah. It can change. It takes two people. It takes two people. So I think when we break down that wall of denial that this is happening, then there's hope. We can't just stay in this place of, well, eventually it's just going to phase out or it's going to just go away. No, we have to recognize that this is actually a part of our relationship. It's a very unhealthy dynamic that we have continued to live in for as long as we have. So, yes, it is possible, but it does take two people. I think awareness has to replace denial. That's step number one, right?
Yep.
We have to feel, I guess, that safety. The nervous system has to feel safe outside of this bond. So we have to really get in touch with that somatic piece. We have to feel regulated. And I think we get in trouble, honestly, and this is where I got in trouble, if I'm being really honest, is I kept placing the hope in that potential that he can change. And that is where we kind of stalled out because he wasn't joining me in this. So I had to let go of who he could be. I can't continue to hang on to this fantasy, and grieving that is really, really difficult. But the moment you stop waiting for them to change is the moment your life starts changing.
Mm.
So we can't change anybody else. We can't force someone to want to change. I like to keep that focus on ourselves. What are the boundaries that we're going to have in place to replace some of the bargaining that might be happening in our heads? We have to stop abandoning ourselves. And I think that's one of the biggest messages that's in this book, truly.
This is such a good conversation. So much helpful information, especially for people who might be for the first time recognizing that, oh, maybe that's what's happening in my dynamic, in my relationship right now. And I hope that this gives you a starting place to start to have that awareness and move into that place of empowerment, focusing on what you have control and that honoring yourself and listening to yourself, using your voice. So, Staci, if anyone in our audience is looking for support, are you taking new clients? How do they get in touch with you? And what is like your ideal client?
Yeah, I am taking clients. You can find me on our Choose Recovery website. You
Put that
can
in the show notes.
schedule a free consult through Vanessa. I just love those who are willing to look inwards, to do the homework, to question things. Those who are motivated are my ideal. Now, that doesn't always happen, but I get really excited about the ones who are like, okay, here I am in my life and I'm not happy with it. I'm struggling. Where do I want to go from here? And I love being that person that gets to join them in that decision. I'm not going to tell them what to do.
Right.
I'm not going to, but I am definitely going to join you, ask some hard questions. I'm going to say, where is it that you ideally want to be? And then I like to help my clients get there.
Mhm.
That would be my ideal.
That sounds awesome. So, do you work with men and women?
Yes. I
And
work with betrayed men, betrayed women. I do brain spotting. So that's a nice modality that really helps with some of deep-rooted trauma.
yeah,
I love what I do. It's fulfilling. It's hard work, but it's amazing. Like just this week in one of my groups, one of the ladies said the magic words, which were, I feel like I'm coming back to myself for the first time. And I was just like, yes, that's my favorite line to hear.
that's why we do this.
That is why we do this.
Because we know what that feels like too.
Feels like,
Oh my
yes.
gosh, this is me. That's why we're here. That's why we do this, because we want everyone to feel that. And I love that you work with betrayed men too, because a lot of times there aren't as many resources out there for betrayed men. And it's important that they get the support that they need as well. So that's important.
Absolutely.
You know? And also, I love brain spotting, and what a great way to complement your work around stepping out of this trauma bond if this is what you find yourself in.
Yes.
So valuable. So,
Very.
okay. Any final words that we haven't said that you feel like are important our audience needs to hear?
I think just one thing, and that is that trauma bonds tend to thrive in secrecy.
Yeah.
And shame is what keeps people stuck. And so when you are with someone in a safe space where you can talk about some of these things, that's what helps rewire your reality.
Mhm.
And that's powerful stuff. So healing requires a lot of co-regulation. before we can step into independence. And so you don't really heal trauma bonds alone. You heal them when you seek a safe connection. And so I guess that's what I would want to encourage everyone to remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I often say that's one of the things I love about group. And a lot of the groups that we run are virtual. And then people have an opportunity to come and do an in-person intensive or join a retreat. And there's just nothing like being in an environment where it doesn't matter if you're having a bad day or if you have to ask a question that you think might be dumb, or if you even have a day to celebrate, like having that safe space that everything is okay because people around you understand it helps you tap into what that safety from within actually feels like. And some people maybe haven't had that for a long time. And so finding
Mm-hmm.
that safe circle of support is critical. I will put Staci's information in the show notes and a link to that book on trauma bonds and the download for the mindful recovery work. And Staci, thanks so much for joining me. I loved having you here, and hopefully we can do it again another time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
See y'all next week.
Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination, it's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.